Bonnie, and thank you, Bob. You know, he's kind of new here, but always a joy to have you here and all of our wonderful guests. Yeah, thank you. And great to have Bonnie and her lovely and talented husband, Ron, right over there on our tech stuff today. Thank you, Ron. Ron's going to be speaking for us in a couple of months, I do believe. I said, lovely and talented. The man has skills. So we'll have them both. Okay, so thank you. Good to have you both here. I love that song. Some words in there that tie into what I'm going to share with you today. Yes, I'm still craving control. Yes, that was a line in there. Yes, I'm still craving control, but at this moment, I remember it comes so clear to me that the minute I surrender, I'm as safe as I can be. Beautiful, beautiful message in that song. So this month, being February, being Valentine's, our theme is You Are Love and You Are Loved. And when we think about love, of course, it's about loving each other and then about loving ourselves. And today I'm going to talk about love in another way, loving what is. Loving what is. Especially, you know, reflecting on the song that Bob sang for our meditation time, there's only love. Well, if there's only love, then of course, loving what is makes perfect sense. Well, that really sounds swell, doesn't it? But it just might push some buttons, too, raise some questions. Loving what is, and I always like to add after that, oh, really? You don't know what I'm going through. You don't know what my life has, what's on my table. And I have to tell you that, as always, when I'm leading up to my Sunday message, I beta test whatever I'm talking about, and I pick the theme, of course, way in advance, and then coming up to the week before, and I think I better put this to the test, you know, beta test it in my own life. And oftentimes right after that comes into my mind, like, what was I thinking when I decided to speak on that subject? Because I got to try it on myself. But then, for example, what was I thinking that really hit home this week? Loving what is, as I sat down to do my tax stuff. Anybody just love doing their taxes? Yeah, it's one of those things. Oh, there she is. Well, she's an accountant, so you're in another category, another realm, Linda. So, it was just a simple, this is a very mundane example, but I thought, okay, Can you use what you're going to be talking about? Can you start loving it instead of automatically go into the, oh, I hate doing this, I can't wait till I'm done, that kind of thing. And, you know, everything in life is spiritually, from the spiritual realm, as we call it, an AFGO, another fabulous growth opportunity. And so this, doing my taxes, was an AFGO, especially from the standpoint of loving what is. Now, I do not mean to be glib and discount what many of you may be going through or what things come up in life, and I've had them too, which are agonizing, that are overwhelming, that are painful, that are daunting, that are discouraging, and more. I don't mean to minimize that at all by using my little trivial example of taxes, but I do know this truth applies. Always remembering AFGOs, another fabulous growth opportunity. But the truth is, life is not something to resist. Life is something to experience and to grow from. I mean, that's pretty axiomatic, isn't it? When you think about how nature works, nothing resists life. It's always about experiencing and growing. And so from that standpoint, I say, okay, well then maybe I am meant to love what is, or that is a version of it. Someone said, I win sometimes and I learn, but I never lose. another way of looking at loving what is. Maybe I win, I always learn, but I don't lose. So, thinking about loving what is, I was amused by this story that came across my email. It was told by a woman who worked in a jewelry store. And one of the things she would do is arrange for couples getting wedding bands to have them engraved with something special. The date they met, the date they're getting married, or maybe a sentimental phrase, or maybe their names, or maybe even a little portion of their wedding vows inside their wedding band. So on this particular day, there was a couple there, and she asked this bride-to-be what she would like inscribed in her husband's or fiancé's ring. And she said, well, we're not very romantic, and actually we're getting married on my fiancé's birthday just so he'll remember our anniversaries. But the woman said, well, isn't there something you'll want him to remember as he looks inside his ring? And she said, well, there sure is. And that's how it happened that the inscription inside her husband's wedding ring came to be, put it back on. Now, to be politically correct, that could go either way, couldn't it? It doesn't just say that the guys need that inscription. Some of, we'll just make this not gender specific. But I love that. See, loving what is, she wasn't quite ready to love what is there. Because sometimes, and like all of us, sometimes we feel that loving what is okay, but most of the time we might feel that it requires just a little bit of our control or our tweaking. As the song said, we've forgotten that I don't need to know everything. I can love what is. I don't need to be controlling, tweaking, or manipulating. Now, I got this thought from the wonderful teacher-writer Byron Katie, and many of you know of Byron Katie. And she wrote a great book called Loving What Is some years ago. And I've read it many times and really appreciated what she has to say about it. And one of the things she says is life is simple. Everything that happens for you, not to you. Life is simple. Everything happens for you, not to you. And here's the best part, she says. You don't have to like it. It's just easier if you do. You don't have to like it, but it's easier if you do. What a simple suggestion, huh? So why is it so hard? Why instead do we waste our time and energy wishing other than what is, shoulding about what other than what is, resisting, struggling, blaming, whining, fussing, and getting frustrated? Why do we do that? Like the bride-to-be, why do we try to manipulate and control things and even people to change in order to suit us instead of what is? Well, I think there are 3 reasons. And the first reason is obviously we think it'll work if we get in the mix. Instead of just loving what is, we think our little touch will work. Number 2, I believe we fear that if we don't react by manipulating or controlling in some way, then nothing will change, nothing will improve. And thirdly, most importantly, we think it'll work to not love what is, but to get in there and try to mess with it because we don't see the bigger picture. We don't see the bigger picture. And so I was thinking about this in view of the life-changing, life-transforming message that we share here every Sunday. We always talk, change your thinking, change your life. And you heard Julie talk about the power of affirmative prayer and how that brings about transformation in our life. So how does that fit with loving what is? Isn't it a contradiction? Versus, changing what is. And then it dawned on me. In the bigger picture, the truth is I can love what is because I can love what really is. I can love what is because I can love what really is. What do I mean by that? I can love what is, what's going on, because I love and trust the infinite is, the infinite cause, God. This is about seeing the bigger picture. Conditions are just effects. Conditions are just conditions. And to really, truly change them occurs at the level of the big is, the infinite is, cause. And so you hear us often talk about cause and effect. All of the stuff going on in our lives, the conditions, circumstances, that's effect. In the bigger picture, where we make the changes, is God, cause. That is the level of creativity and causation that's absolutely untouched by conditions. It's like you almost take a quantum leap in your thinking and say, God isn't sitting there with a list of saying, well, you may want this improvement in your life, but you got to remember there's this problem and there's this person and there's this bit of lack. It's like we go to that place of untouched by conditions. And yet in that very place is where conditions can be transformed. That's where it starts. So, realizing that I don't need to struggle with conditions or with what is, and I can expand my perspective to that realm of what Ernest Holmes, the architect of our philosophy, wrote, unconditioned causation. That's that level of, it's not worried about or even touched by conditions. When I can get my perspective to that level, that's the level where creative and lasting change originates. And I'm open to it. That really is a place where I'm open to it. I have a daily reading book that I love. It's called 365 Days of Richer Living. And 1 month is by Dr. Ernest Holmes, and 1 month is by Raymond Charles Barker, who was also a New Thought minister, teacher, not long ago, actually, lived until about 20 years ago. And in this particular passage, I loved it. It was so straightforward. Barker wrote, "There's no resistance in me. I let God act. There's no resistance in me. I let God act. Knowing that infinite mind thinks through my mind at every instant, and its ideas are flowing through me into form." Don't you love that? Just think about that. When we get out of the way, infinite mind, the mind of God, that is beyond comprehension, beyond conditions, thinks through my mind at every instant, and its ideas are flowing through me into new things. When I get out of the way. So I'd like you to try that this week. Try it. Notice there's something you're dealing with. And notice that when you stop resisting, how your mind opens to the flow of ideas. One way to stop resisting is, as Pawnee was singing, I don't need to know. So you open your mind instead of fighting it, I gotta cheat, I don't want it, it's awful, it's gotta be over. Just try opening and loving what is, and notice that it's like oxygen to your mind, your thoughts. You find maybe thoughts and ideas will come relating to that situation, or maybe initially they'll relate to something else going on in your life, some bigger other situation. But you're opening yourself to a flow that we cannot make happen, but we can allow it. Get out of the way. Now, let me just add a little caveat. You may not be able to say, I can love what is, because you may not be feeling the love. A lot of those situations that we're looking at, it's a big leap to say love what is, but how about this? Accepting what is. Right? Just accept that it is, or noticing with detachment. I'm noticing it, but I'm not attached to it, how it needs to look. Those are versions of loving what is, and kind of on-ramps to full out loving what is. Or letting it be. Whatever it is, letting it be. That can open us up to loving what is, too. Here's how Dr. Ernest Holmes put it in his book, This Thing Called You. He said, do not wait. Today is the time to start. Right where you are is the place to begin. Right in the middle of what is. That's my little addition there. Start right here, right now, right in the midst of what is. and believe in your direct relationship with life, with God, with Spirit, and you will not be disappointed. So when I look at it from this perspective, I understand in a new way the meaning of what Carl Rogers, the therapist, counselor, psychologist from many years ago said. I'm summing it up, but he said, when I accept things as they are, they change. And when I accept myself as I am, I change. It's a version of loving what is and seeing that it happened. Things change. Try it. Try it. It isn't when I accept things as they are and then I get busy manipulating and controlling them. It's when I go into that place of loving what is, they change. One of my favorite authors that I quote many times, Brian Andreas, who does little pieces called The Story People. They're just little short but very wise snippets of wisdom. And so as I share this with you, think about something that's up for you right now, that's bugging you, worrying you, that you're having trouble with the loving what is. Just one thing. And he wrote about that. He said, this is a giant block of whatever is most difficult for you to carry. And trust me on this, he says, you'll lug it around more times than you can count until you decide that it is exactly what you want to do most. And then it won't weigh a thing. That's kind of a big challenge, but try it. Isn't it interesting? Because usually what makes the burden so heavy is, I don't want it. I don't like it. It shouldn't be. Try it this week, maybe with something small. Because sometimes, we say, oh, wow, that's a great idea. And then we try it on with something really, really big. And we're so conditioned to think otherwise that we say, well, that didn't work. Let's start with something small and say, I didn't think I wanted to do this. I'm going to turn it around and I'm going to say, this is exactly what I want to be doing right now. I want to be doing my taxes right now, just as an example. So, when I love and accept what is instead of fighting it, and I get out of my own way, actually, more than that, when I get out of God's way, as Ralph Waldo Emerson, I'm doing this. I'm getting my bloated nothingness out of the way of the divine circuits. Emerson, he was not mincing words. Get your bloated nothingness out of the way of the divine circuits. In other words, our ego need to control, manipulate, change something at the material level. The divine circuits, think about that. That's a version of saying, I open my mind and Spirit's mind is thinking through me. Divine circuits. Wow, what a resource. Always I wonder then, well, how can I kind of get into this mode of loving what is? Because I'm so busy thinking about all the things I need to do to change things. And by the way, this does not mean don't do due diligence in our lives and take responsibility for things that we need to take responsibility for. But it means don't carry the burden. Don't carry the burden of it. Love what is, and you'll be so informed about what to do. But a little bit of an entree to that is, as another author I wrote who very much writes a lot about taking the gentle approach to life, and she said, breathe, relax, allow, and maybe even enjoy. So you're thinking about that, something that's not really all that lovable. I'm having trouble loving what is. So just sit with it and breathe. And then relax. Let the shoulders go down. Allow. And maybe even enjoy. Now, to love what is does not mean being a passive doormat. Doesn't mean that at all. It simply recalibrates our energy and our attention so that two things can happen. One, it gets us in a position where we can recognize the good and the gifts and the blessings that we already have As Byron Katie wrote, put it so clearly, see if you can identify, I can. We all do emotional gymnastics just to get what we already have. And because we're doing the gymnastics, we don't see that we already have it. So again, it's not about being a doormat. It's about positioning ourselves to recognize what we already have so we don't have to keep doing those emotional gymnastics just to get what we already have. And because we're so busy doing the gymnastics that she says that we don't see that we already have it. We're talking about this a little bit in our class based on Dr. Dennis Merritt Jones' book, The Art of Abundance, which is all about abundant living. And the theme throughout is recognizing what we already have. Recognizing what we already have. All right, so it positions you to do that and also to do this. It positions us so that transformation can actually occur. It frees us to turn our attention from arguing with what is to creating something new. Seems simple and seems obvious, but if you contemplate again something that you are not quite ready to say, I'm loving what is, also notice you're arguing with it in some way. I know I am. There's kind of just a background little rumble of arguing with it. It shouldn't be. I wish it was over. What did I do wrong? All of that stuff. We're arguing with it. And if we can just say, I love what is. I'm accepting what is. I'm noticing it without attachment. Something creative starts to happen. So it's like about stop complaining and start creating. Stop complaining and start creating. That's another way of loving what is. Here's some more wise counsel from Dr. Ernest Holmes. He said, trust life. Now that's a pretty good two-word way of saying love what is. Trust life. Today I am resolved, he says, to see the good in everyone and every event. Now, I can do that if I trust life. Today I am resolved to see the good in everyone and every event. There is no power in the universe which wishes anyone any ill. Sometimes we think that life's against us. And he's reminding us there's no power in the universe which wishes anyone ill. Trust life. And so he goes on to say, life is good and God is good. Why not accept this and begin to live? And then he adds, and if I do not always have my own way, I must see this as right action too. Oh. I was getting to think maybe things always went his way. But again, it's about raising our perspective. Raising that perspective, loving what is, and recognizing there's something greater in the big is. Changing your perspective. It's like changing our perspective from I've had enough to I am enough. I've had enough to I am enough. Try that. Whatever is working your last good nerve this week. I am enough. Now, one more thing. This might seem pretty obvious, but resistance. Let's look at resistance, because it's very simple. If you're resisting, you're not loving what is. If I'm resisting, I am simply not loving what is. If I am suffering, if I am struggling, I'm not loving what is. This is about surrender. Surrender. Surrendering the struggle. Surrendering the struggle. What a relief. In Richer Living, again, it says, all resistance to my problems is erased, because the problems are merely my opportunities to prove God as the only cause. Again, reminding us that the problem is effect. God is the cause. And so he says, why fight the problem? I just raise my attention to the big what is, and recognize that's where the only cause is, and the kind of cause that changes everything and sustains it. He said, so I accept every change that appears on my pathway, and I find God in it. I find God in it. That is loving what is. That is creating, not complaining. Loving what is. Breathe. Relax. Allow. Maybe enjoy. And that is the miracle. That's the transformational power in loving what is. I don't need to know, as Fonny's beautiful song said, I don't need to know. That's part of letting go and saying, it is what it is. I don't have to fight it. I don't have to struggle with it. Because I know there's something greater that I surrender that struggle to, and that is God, and it infuses my mind and my creative energy with all kinds of options and solutions, and mostly with peace of mind. So as Byron Katie said, let me remind you, you don't have to like it, but it's easier if you do. And so it is.